Started. Again, my name is Neil Plotnick at Everett High School. If you wanted to drive from here to there, it'll take about 20 minutes. It's just borders Boston. If you know, the new casino is in Everett. I don't go to the casino except for lunch once in a while. But thank you for having me here. I was at last year's open office conference, at the LibrePlanet conference, and I had spoken to Greg Farnworth and said, I want to do a presentation, and you're going to see the result of that here today. So a little bit about me. I've been teaching computer science as part of what I do for about 15. I've been teaching almost 20 years. About 15 of that has been computer science. Prior to that, I was working at Heathkit's store. I actually walked into a computer store when I was in college, dropped out of grad school, got a job at a computer store. Heathkit Zenith, you make your own TVs, make your own computers, and that's where I really started to learn about computers. They sent me for training. I learned how to do Novell NetWare, Apple networking, that kind of stuff. I moved up here. I worked at a microwave computer store for about a year. And then I got what I would call a dream computer job. I was hired by PC Week, Ziff-Davis Publishing. I was the IT guy for the editorial side of the business, and I did that for about 10 years. I spent a couple of years at a software development firm that was also run by Ziff-Davis Publishing. Maybe you heard of ZiffNet, which was a CompuServe AOL competitor. I was the IT guy for them for about 2 years. And I learned how not to do software development. I'm not a software engineer. I don't have that type of training. I don't like doing software. I do know write programs, but it's not my gig. My real passion was information technology. I like the blinking lights. I like playing with screwdrivers and hardware. And when I was there, I had some good stuff. I wrote a book about how to be an IT professional. I wrote a column for PC Week. I was sort of a Dear Abby for them. I got people would write in from all kinds of questions about how do I do this, how do I do that, and that was a fun career. But I have a son who has special needs. I became a teacher about 20 years ago, and I've been blessed to have been recognized for my teaching. Right there in the middle, it's a picture of me at Constitution Hall in 2015. I was the winner of the Presidential Award for Excellence in Math and Science Teaching, which is sort of the nation's Emmy, or Academy Award for Science STEM Teaching. And it's been able to give me a lot of adventures. NC-WIT, the National Center for Women in Information Technology, recognized me as the Massachusetts Teacher of the Year last year. I've had a number of thank you. I have some of my scholars, since you'll see in a couple of the slides, young women who have passed through my classroom who are now working in information technology and software engineering. I got to join the Civil Air Patrol. I got to fly through the Eclipse a couple of weeks ago in a Cessna, about 10,000 feet over Maine. Just last week, this past Thursday, the National Science Foundation, through the PAIMST awardees, which I'm a member of now, had me at Fenway Park for their STEM Day. I got to wave to the crowd from behind the pitcher's mound, which was kind of a thrill, even for a Yankee fan, to be at Fenway to do that. So being a teacher, sometimes you get some really great perks. Obviously, the best perk is dealing with my kids. And a little bit about Everett High School. It's about 2,300 students. We have over 60 languages spoken in my school. We have a large number of students who speak Spanish, maybe Honduras and Guatemalans and Dominicans. We have Haitian Creole spoken, a lot of Brazilian students. We have a lot of kids who speak Arabic from different parts of Morocco and other parts of Somalia. We have kids who speak Amharic. We have Nepali students. If you need somebody who understands multilingual students, hit me up. I'll be happy to talk to you about getting that. We're a Title I school. Simply put, we're not a rich community. We're an immigrant community. About half the students come from homes where English is not the primary language being spoken. So for me, it's a challenge, and a good challenge. I learn a lot about cultures and different things. We have two computer science pathways, so to speak. We have a programming pathway, which I don't do, where the students can end up taking two different kinds of AP classes. They're not mutually exclusive. CSP, Computer Science Principles. This is typical for a lot of high schools. We use Python for our language. CSA, which is the older AP course, is a Java class. So students in our class learn computer programming. If they do that as a pathway, they're going to learn Java, Python. They'll start off with Scratch or Snap. Then there's me. I am the only pathway teacher for cybersecurity, which is my specialty. So I have a 2-year pathway for kids, and I'm going to show you a lot about what I'm doing with those students in this presentation. And again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to hit me up with questions. I'm a teacher. There are stupid questions. I don't say that, but there are such things as stupid questions, but I'm not expecting that. So here's a typical high school student. They log in at my school. This is what they're going to see. This is clever. They have to authenticate using a Google Gmail account. And you can see we use things like Canvas and Google Classroom. A lot of these things are, as you would say, proprietary, and there's a lot of data that they gather from our kids. There's a lot of commercial software people use in computer science teaching. There's a lot of commercial software people use in cybersecurity. When I say commercial, some of it's free. I'm wearing a hat from cyber.org. I'm going to talk about them in a minute. Big proponent of what they're doing. But I was using a proprietary piece of software. I won't mention the company. And I had a really bright student who said, I did this lab for 3 days, and I read everything, and I clicked, and I clicked, and I clicked, and I clicked, and I have no idea what the hell I did. Having been an IT person, I said, well, if I was going to teach you to be my apprentice, if you're going to be my work, this is what I want to teach you. So I started doing my own thing. I started rolling my own stuff. I started bringing GNU Linux into my classroom. First, I did it with my computer club, because we had these kids that said, look, if an old computer sitting under a desk or sitting in a closet not being used, you want to get it, refurbish it, and I'm not going to have you pirate keys from Microsoft or something like that. Let's try to give you a brand new modern operating system that could work with older hardware, that is going to have no problems with having a software license. So that was the first thing I did. And I started using Linux in that manner. I had kids 15, 20 years ago trying out Knoppix and Slackware. So then the other thing that was a big roadblock, as you sort of a little example here, was getting around the blocks that the IT department had on you. So I was able to get a grant and got these Finch robots. They were developed by Birdbrain Technologies in Carnegie Mellon. Has started developing them, and I got free robots to use in my classroom. So you plug them in with the USB, and everything's blocked. And I asked the guys in the IT department, well, what can I do? Well, we're not going to unblock it. You have to figure it out, you know. So I said, okay, screw you. I got my USB sticks, and I put Linux on them, plugged them in, Control-Alt-Delete, hit F12 or whatever those computers required, and they booted up. And the kids were learning how to type Python code using Nano. And a kid said to me, hey, this feels like real programming. And I go, well, it is real programming. But they felt this kind of like freedom that they got to control the computer at a low level. They got to take over. They got to bypass all the stuff that the IT people were doing. And they said, this is kind of great. It was kind of exciting. So this is an issue of Linux format that I wrote a feature article for in May 2020. Right when the pandemic hit, this hit the newsstands. I'm not sure if anybody saw this, but it says the story of how Neil Plotnick, that's me, brought computer science to an American school, writing on the back of Linux, open source, and a USB stick. So I went up to I would start collecting USB sticks, sometimes to give them away at conferences. I went to Micro Center or whoever. Oh, look, 5 for $1. So I got, cheap Linux sticks, and everybody got their own USB stick, and they're all running their own Linux. And that's what I started doing. And I said, I have to do something more than that. I wanted to not just have these kids rebooting computers, and what happens if they have a Mac in the classroom, or what are they going to go do something like that. So this is Data Rack 2.3 or 3, whatever version. I started using an old all-in-one Dell box that I grabbed, that I threw a copy of Linux Server on. And this is one of my students. This is a young lady here. Akila is just fabulous. Anytime I ask her, you want to try this? She goes, I'll do it. So she's on her hands and knees with a screwdriver, and she's installing my brand new Lenovo rack-mounted system on this data rack that I now have in my classroom, which is running Debian server. and we install SSH on it, so everybody in the school, anybody who's in the district actually on our WAN can get in and log in and start doing stuff. So I actually have a full-blown network in my classroom. We have our own hubs, we have our own Wi-Fi, so the district does not support BYOD. So I'm like, okay, I'll do it. So kids in my classroom can bring their own devices in, and they can log into the network, and they can do things that would not otherwise be possible anywhere else in the building. So they haven't stopped me, which is great. And so I show this off to the kids in the other rooms. They go, you can do this. I go, yeah, sure. I co-teach chemistry. So chemistry teacher was out the other day. He got COVID. So the kids who are sophomores who say, oh, you don't just teach special ed chemistry. I said, no, I teach other things. What do you teach? So we have these giant screen live TVs, and I logged into using SSH to my server. I said, this is in my room downstairs. Watch what we can do. Kid from my computer club happened to be there. Jorge starts showing them things like lolcat with Fortune, and he starts showing them things like cows say. So the kid's like, oh, have a cow say something about me. And it was kind of a fun thing. Like, can I take your class? I go, sure, you could take my class. So a lot of what I have to do is a sales job. A lot of times I'm always showing kids, hey, you can do these things. And what do you think the number one question is? Do you know how to hack? And I have this in my classroom. I have a calendar. And when the kid comes to my club or comes to my classroom and they say, Mr. Plotnick, can you show me how to hack? I scream. I point at them. I write their name down, put it on a sticky note, and it's on my calendar. Because that's what kids think I do. I said, yes, you know how to hack? I go, well, yeah. I'm going to show you some real life stuff that we actually did in my classroom that illustrates just how, well, there's a problem in the nation with technology, and my school is just a simple, small example of that. So what do you do as a teacher? You have to tell the kids how to do stuff. And I had kids saying to me, how do you do this? I demo on the screen. Okay, you type this in, SSH at 10.1.12. whatever the IP address is, and you open up Nano and you type in this. And after like the third or fourth step, they're like, what did you just do? So I have documents. I printed out the documents, put it in their folder. Here's how you just follow it, screenshot everything, and they go, how do you do it? So I started making videos. This gives you a little introduction to some of the stuff I do. What I'm going to ask with the community is, if you think what I'm doing is valuable, if you think these lessons that I have, I'd like to have your help in helping me, like, say, hey, how do you store this? I know the Savannah hackers might have a way of, I saw the education. So I have a lot of lessons on how to do different things that are command line programming, and bash scripting is what I teach now. That's my language of choice. I teach the kids bash because I figure where else are they going to learn it? And I have people who are in college saying, I didn't learn how to do this until I was a sophomore or a junior, and your kids are learning it and they're in 10th and 11th grade. That's really cool, and I'd like to validate that I'm doing this. So some of the things I do here, I'm using CLI, the command line interface, to capture text. I'm showing them how to do things like how to change, modify Linux file permissions to make files executable. I'm going over, I do a lot, when I do with bash scripting, I have a lesson, I call it While Loops the Musical. And I actually have students doing, it was one of the lessons, I'm going to be doing a flash talk about this at the CSTA, Computer Science Teacher Association. They got invited to do a talk there in July in Vegas. I actually have the kids playing musical chairs. Great, simple game, musical chairs. And then I have them write down the rules of musical chairs. So while the music is playing, you circle the chairs. And then when the music stops, you sit down. The number of chairs is equal to the number of players minus 1. And then you go around and do it again. And they iterate. So they see a while loop is just how you play a game. And I have the kids do the pseudocode for this. And because I said before they're in multiple language learners, my students write it down in Spanish or in Portuguese. So it makes it really great that they can actually feel that they're part of the learning process, that their culture and their understanding of how they would write things out in pseudocode. Because when you write a program, you accomplish the same goal, but you may write it differently than your neighbor does. So that's one of the things. I can't really tell here, but I have grep I teach a whole section on how to use grep. So what do the kids look at? I have them looking at the I Have a Dream speech and the other speeches that are in seminal documents in American history, the Gettysburg Address. So one of the examples I did for the grep is I have a word cloud of the I Have a Dream speech. I just show them the word cloud, and you see the words freedom, slavery, and other things. I say, who said this? They go, oh, it must have been Martin Luther King's speech. I go, yeah. How do they figure out how the bigger words are versus the smaller words? It's frequency analysis, right? So I said, well, we can do that with grep and look for how many times the word Georgia appears or whatever, and look at the word thee and them show up. Well, how do you filter it so that you only get the word the, not them or their? And then I let them bring in, my students or them, bring in their own literature, their songs, their music, or whatever, and run the same programs against them to make a culturally responsible teaching, in my view, is to actually show them, hey, you can take what you like and you can apply computer science to it. So that's kind of what I like to roll that way, so that my kids can feel that they have a place in the classroom, that their stuff, that I don't want to just give them stuff to look at, because we could all do that. But take what I'm teaching you and bring your own stuff into it. I think that's that's a much more powerful way of doing things. So here's what I do the first week of school. I do the digital footprint. What does Google know about you? How many different apps do you have on your phone? And I say, hey, look at it. 25 per page, right? How many pages do you have? 130, 140, whatever? That doesn't include things like the loyalty cards you have. If you go shopping at CVS or some other store, you have a card. How many places on the web do you authenticate with your email? How many different accounts do you have on the web? And I had a student say, Mr. Plotnick, you're scaring me. I go, good. You should be. You should be afraid that you're sharing your data. Down beneath this, there's this is my own personal Gmail promotions files from my work and my personal Gmail. And I said to the students, if you just looked at my promotions folders, what do you know about me? Well, my personal one has things like, Instacart maybe, or coffee, or Dunkin' Donuts, that I get stuff from Chewy. So I said, can you build a profile about me? I always let them, dox me. They can see that, oh, you must have pets because you're buying food from Chewy. You like coffee. They can see about maybe I'm getting emails from various political or religious organizations. So they can see just in a Gmail account how much I'm getting targeted or how much information they know about me. And the other side is the one I use for work. And they see there's different ads. I say, look, it's the same person. It's the same damn computer. But I'm getting two sets of emails coming into my inbox just because I have different personalities, depending on you as well. As a student, as a mom or a dad, or whoever you are, you're going to have different personalities, and they're targeting me through my folder here. So that was one of the first things I always do with them. That's a great way to get them a little bit excited. Then I have a lesson, and this is actually the Free Software Foundation. People came to my school, not once but twice. They came this past fall. This is the first time they came. I had the students look at EULAs, and my interpretive dance. You see this in the kids. They take their phone, and kids are always doing this. They're all doing TikTok dances. And if you go to a high school, you'll see this. I'm sure middle school is the same way. Kids are sharing stuff all the time. And I said, do you know what you signed up for? Do you know when you click yes, 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 what does that mean? What do they know about you? Do they owe anything? So one of my students, she won an Aspirations Award from NC, which her first ever winner. This is the one she did for TikTok. And I asked them to list, like, social media place, have there been any data breaches? Who owns them? What do they ask? What kind of information are they gathering on you? And this is just an example of that. So again, when the students do this, we have what's called a galley walk in Teacher Talk. We have all the kids put up their posters, and they walk around and they look at what everybody else has learned or what everybody else is showing them. So it's a great way to see that. And we had kids doing this for different social media places that they're active with, whether it's music or just like X or whatever they're using. Instagram is really big. So I want them to be aware of how they do this. So this is just an example of what that work is. Then I go into networking. So we actually do all the fancy schmancy stuff. There's a lot of PR kind of stuff that I do, but I also have them do a lot of work that is current events. I mean, they'll run up to the last general election, a lot of cyber stuff. Poor Chris Krebs got fired because he said the election was clean. But I do have, there's always something that's going on so in TV or in the news that's going on. We have hacks going on all the time. So I always have plenty of fodder to share with the kids. But this is what I teach with networking. The usual stuff like ping, TCP dump, Nmap. We did this the other day. I showed that, oh, Nmap, look at all these different things. So we did Nmap on our gateway in the school. And I said, okay, great. We know what services is running. We know that's Telnet, SSH, HTTP, so we know what services are running. Then I have the kids look up every vulnerability that are known for those particular services. I said, it's like, you know the house exists. Ping just tells you the house is there. Mmap tells you how many doors and windows it has and what kind of doors and windows they have. So when you case the joint, when you're going to try to break in, you try to see, okay, I'm going to go into the first floor door that's right there, that's open. I can break into that window really easily. I said, it's the same thing with computers. They have doors and windows that let you in, the services that you're running. So when you know what doors and windows are there, you can sort of figure out, how do I break in? How do I keep, and if, obviously for red team people, how do I break in? For blue team people, how do I keep people out? Do you need to put locks in the windows? Yes. Do you need to put bars in the doors? Maybe you do. And how do you do those types of things? And that's the analogy that I use. We did the usual things like IP addressing. I do egg cartons for binary, so the kids can learn how to take egg cartons to figure out how to do binary math with them. I try to do a lot of hands-on activities with them, like my musical chairs for the while loops. This is a project Woody did just last year. I have a couple of old computers. Yes, they're running Linux. That we got from the scrap heap. They were going to get thrown out. So I said, no, they're fine. Let's just reboot them. But they don't have Wi-Fi built in. And they're on the side of the room that doesn't have Wi-Fi. So on my Raspberry Pi 3B, I'll set up as a wireless bridge. So this is an actual hands-on project we did where I had my Raspberry Pi, which is on one side plugged into an Ethernet hub, and the other side is hooked up to the Wi-Fi and acts as a bridge. So we had to learn about DHCP and how do we do all these types of things. So you know, they think, hey, this is magic. I go, well, in some ways it is. I will say to the kids, this black box here, this computer is magic. You can collect, you can touch information anywhere in the world. And isn't it great if you know how the damn thing works? You know, that is not just something that it exists and we worship it. No, you can actually control it and take advantage of it. And know that if it takes, you could take advantage of it, it could take advantage of you, and how do you prevent that? So it's a kind of a very valuable lesson, I think, when they feel empowered to understand how this technology is affecting their lives and that they can control it. So this is a real-world example of actually doing some stuff. And no, I didn't know how to do all these things. I say, I don't know how to do everything. This is what the internet's invented for, you know. Somebody wrote a tutorial. Somebody has a guide to how to set up all these configuration files. And it's okay to fail because it's never going to work the first time. It's never going to work the first time, which is the biggest lesson, I think, everybody who works in computers. So I'm wearing a cyber.org hat. I do want to speak about them. Cyber.org is funded by the federal government through the CISA, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Administration, and through them, they have access to a cyber range. And this is an actual screenshot of the cyber range that have been, this is my teacher dashboard. And the usernames are all nonsense. The passwords are all nonsense. They don't collect any student information. They give me a classroom. They say, here's the classroom, and I have on the left, I put the nicknames for them. These are what I know. So Cyber.org doesn't collect any information. So kudos to them. They don't have to worry about privacy and anything like that. And they have access to 4 full-blown VMs. There's a Kali Linux. They also have a Windows Server, Windows Workstation, and a regular Ubuntu client. And in a sandbox environment, they can do all kinds of cyber attacks, and they can also learn how to use the command line and do everything. There's no persistence, though. So if they write a program, or they do some batch script or something like that, they don't come back when they log in. It's gone. It lasts for an hour, and then it's gone. So it's great for security and privacy. The kids are not going to be able to actually use a Kali Linux attack from this VM out into the real world, which is good. But it's also a pain, because if I want to actually see how this stuff works, I still have my own network. So just as a little self-plug here, some of the lessons I've written are actually being used there. So this is the lab I wrote on TCP dump. This is actually free and available. Anybody can get this. If you're an American-based school, you can apply for an account. They have more curriculum than just cybersecurity. They have computer programming. They have things from K through 12, all free, that you can use for your classroom. It's all available with lesson plans and quizzes. This happens to be the one of the few that I wrote. This one is a TCP dump. So they can go in, they have to learn how to sudo and all those other things you need to do. So very excited that they actually, pay me a little bit of money for that. Now, when I mentioned before, I actually founded on Facebook a group dedicated to cybersecurity education group. There's 1,700 members. All the lessons that I write, that I have a chance to publish, I put up there. So I have a whole bunch of lessons on doing different things with Linux and doing different things with other social media. I put resources up there. It's Facebook. And again, if then the community said, hey, Neil, we'd love that you're doing this. We'd love to have a way we can post this and share this so that anybody can want to contribute to it, anybody wants to share it, and wants to take my stuff and use it. I'm really interested in knowing that, hey, we want to partner with me, and I'll be happy to send and share everything else in a free, open way. I call it open source teaching. When somebody writes a play, the people who perform it are going to do it differently than you. Right? Every time you see a performance, even if it's the same actors, it's going to be a little different because the audience is different, the time is different, they feel different. That's great. I mean, you don't want it to be dry and stale. It should also be modified for the kids in front of you. The kids that I have in front of me are not going to be the same as kids in every other community in this country or around the world. So the lessons that I teach are designed for the kids that I work with. For most of my students, they've never done any of these things before. For most of my students, I'd say 90% or more, this is the first time I ever had a real computer programming class. So I take that as a very big responsibility that I need to make sure that they feel they can do this kind of work. There's a code.org has a lesson video they have, and a woman says, you don't have to be a genius to read. You don't have to be a genius to be a computer programmer. So for me, being successful in this field requires that I give them those tools at their level that they feel they can be comfortable. And, most of them have been pretty good. That picture I showed you before from the Linux Format magazine, two of the women in the front row, they both got UMass Boston computer science degrees. They're both working now. One's a full stack developer. Junior D'Souza, he's now working at Wayfair, I believe. He's a software engineer for them. But I said, you don't have to be a software engineer to use a computer. I mean, we use a phone every day. So at least if you know how these things work, you're doing better. So I like to show a real live scenario that came into my school. I didn't install, but the school installed these brand new digital clock PA systems in every room. And here's what happened. Ding, ding, ding. The bells rang, and the network crashed. I mean, the whole thing went down. And they couldn't figure out what was wrong. I was going crazy, because as an IT guy, you're like, it doesn't work right. Figure out what the hell's wrong. Scan the network. Figure out what's wrong. Well, we'll just change some stuff and we'll do some stuff. And so I said, no, you're not doing this right. So here's what I did. Anybody recognize that? It's Wireshark, right? Here's Wireshark under normal operations. Everything's green, everything's happy, everything's moving around nicely. I figured out what the IP address was for the gateway. By the way, the IP address for the gateway was also the main network switch for the whole building, which was unlocked. There was no password, there was no username. So anybody who was logged into the network could have easily just rebooted the entire switch, updated the firmware, changed the VLANs. Yes, you have it. This is what I said before. This is what goes on in most of the schools, and I'm sure companies everywhere. The low-hanging fruit of IT is that they get the things working, but they don't know what they're working with. So I hacked the school, so to speak, and I showed them the kids. This is actually in my classroom, live, showing them showing the network. I go, okay, guys, the bell's gonna ring. All right, watch what happens. Anybody know what was wrong? Anybody want to take a venture, a guess? There's a lot of dupe acts and retransmissions. It was, I think there's a loop somewhere, but anyway, so I took it upon myself to write to Valcom. I said, what the hell's going on? I see that they do not have STP enabled. And they said, yes, Neil, please enable STP, Spanning Tree Protocol. I can't tell you how, it was weeks before they actually listened to me. I said, I don't have an advanced degree, I don't have a doctorate in networking engineering, but I used to do this for a living. You would think that maybe I might know what I'm talking about. So I said to them, yes, mic drop, this is what the problem is. And they agreed, and eventually they fixed it. So I'm like, yay, me. But why the hell it lasted for so long time? But I had to show them using the dump logs of everything, saying, yes, you having duplicate acts and you're having retransmissions is because you have a loop in the infrastructure and you don't have STP enabled. So they enabled STP, and eventually it does seem to be working. I still think there's a loop somewhere, but it's not my problem. We do programming. We do. I do all these other things. We do input, output. We learn about loops. We learn data to files. I have the kids write data to a file. They have to get their neighbor's file to see if they can read them, whether it's CSV or some other method. So they're doing some real computer programming. I do this all in Bash. We had a project that we had to write a script that would create unique passwords. Now I know it's not a long passphrase. Somebody flame me for not saying that's not the way to do a password, because it's not just uppercase, lowercase number. But my programming language was like, okay, give me a random shape, a random color, a number, and a special character, as a password. So here's an example over there where I have purple 21 pentagons left bracket, or red 15 whatever with an ampersand. And they had to use these things with a bash script, like shuff, srandom. We talked about srandom versus random, and what is a real random number, and why cryptologically it may not be a real random thing. We had to use lists, they had to use strings, they had to use for loops, they had to use arrays. So I'm teaching computer programming using bash scripting as the language of choice. And as my friend who teaches computer programming says, you're not really teaching algorithms, really, you're teaching coding. I said, well, whatever gets the job done. They don't have to know how to write a bubble sort or some other tool. If there's something, like I said, if you're inventing a car, somebody already made the wheel. All right, so I said everything here is like Legos, and that's what I like about GNU Linux, is that everything's already there. Somebody's already done that work for you. And we could take a little piece from this program, a little piece from that program, stick it together in a bash script, and boy, you have something really cool. Again, I'd love to have any questions or comments, anything you want to share with me, I'd be happy to. And if you have something you want to hook me up with something, I'd be happy to do that too. So, thank you. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, this is so cool. And you are like one of the rare good teachers out there. And it's just, your talk was just simply a pleasure. I love what you do in your classroom, especially the network, the server that you have there and what you show your students. That's super fantastic. I have a question in here. And my question is, for someone, I used to do a lot of volunteering when I was a student and a graduate student. And I felt like maybe about 10 years ago, I was able to connect with students and inspire them to go into STEM fields. But now I feel like there's this huge disconnect because of students being so obsessed with social media, and I know you have that like digital footprint of things, and that's really great. But I want to ask, what would be your recommendation, or what would you suggest for someone who wants to like reconnect with students and reconnect with the community? Because I'm no longer in academia, but yeah, what would be your suggestions? Because there's so much I would love to do.
Well, I'll give a shout out to the CSTA, the Computer Science Teachers Association has chapters in every state. And they have members in every state who would love to have people come into the classroom. I mean, the FSF came to my school. The first time they came to just meet with one class. The last time they came in, if you got the FSF bulletin, you'll see software in school, free software, school, free software. That was my school. So connect with them. I'm always in the looking out. There's a specific thing I want to mention. I went to this NICE 12K. NICE is a cybersecurity education thing. I went to their conference in Phoenix this past year, and they're talking about RA, which means Registered Apprenticeship. I had never heard of it. Here we are in Massachusetts. Don't get it. If you're a Massachusetts person, we're not really leading the nation in education for computers in K through 12. We're not. When I went to the CSTA in Chicago, Iowa, I'm not going to, Iowa had 110 teachers there. The state paid for them to go to learn about this. Registered Apprenticeship Program, let me give you an example. If you want to become a plumber or an electrician with a high school diploma, you go to the local union hall or whatever, you have the classroom. It takes 4 years to become a plumber. It's just to go into college, right? You have all this, but you work with someone who is licensed in that area, who mentors you and teaches you. Registered apprenticeship programs in other states, I was hearing about these kids were getting IT or cyber experiences in a real world job, getting paid internships. And the companies were getting somebody who was really into it. What a win-win thing. So I'm actually working with my state senator and here in Massachusetts, whose son actually is a student in my class. But we're trying to get through the Department of Ed, the Department of Workforce Development, exactly, so we can do a registered apprenticeship program so that you can actually have real jobs for real kids who can do things and who really want to learn. So partner with your schools. Call your local high school up. I mean, a lot of these things, like I've had Google engineers come to my classroom. I've had people come in from Amazon. They have future engineers. And it's a nice little thing. They come in, they answer questions. People say, how much do you get paid? It was like the first thing. What's your job like? Then the kids get sort of like, you had to go to college for that? You don't have to go to college. I don't have an IT degree. I have a degree in geography. But I got into computers and I said, I really want to learn this stuff. And that's how I got involved with learning about computers. I took Fortran and punch cards back in 1980, whatever. Why the hell would I want to do that for a living? And I got an IBM clone and I started learning how to, write up my first AutoExec bat file and stuff like that. And I'm like, oh, I had a professor in geography who asked me to figure out how to get the data from the VAX down to our Apple II for our lab for image processing, and I learned how to do that. And he said, this is the best manual I've ever seen. You should go into this. So I became a computer person by accident. I'm sure a lot of us are in that same idea. I never wanted to be a computer person, but I did. And it's been good for me doing it that way. So like I said, there's a lot of ways. Hook up, go call your local teachers. Hey, can I come in and just visit? I don't mind asking. If you don't ask, the answer is no. But if you do ask, good things happen. So please, next.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. One thing. So due to the delays, we are extending the talk. Lunch starts at 1. I just want to let you know.
Okay.
Due to the delays, we are extending the talk a little bit. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Please.
My first part is that, have you ever contacted FSF for this story? Because there is an educational group in FS. Your story is worth teaching there. That's the first part. Second, I have a question. In schools, we don't only teach kids skills, we also teach them ideas, philosophies. So I have seen a lot of skills. Have you ever taught them about why we have free software, why we need free software, how to collaborate, this kind of thing?
Yes, I mean, I think obviously if I've had the FSF come to my school do a presentation, I embrace this whole idea. about why free software and collaboration is important, and what's the dangers of proprietariness in the field. And if you ever see somebody fill out a form, if you go to the College Board to take the PSAT, they have this survey they give you. You don't have to answer the questions, but there are dozens and dozens of questions they ask of you. And I'm not going to say it's invasive, but you don't need to know that. I mean, you're testing my math and science ability, or English and math. You don't need to know what I want to study and my parents go to college or whatever. I mean, that information is important, but it's not germane to this kind of conversation. So yes, and again, anybody from the community who wants to get me hooked up with some way, more than happy to communicate and collaborate and share what I've been doing, because I'm very happy to do that. Yes.
Hello, thank you. And I know Teacher Appreciation Week is coming up, so thank you for being a teacher. I'm wondering how about curriculum alignment with the digital literacy standards for Massachusetts, like if what you're working on, how you've done alignment, and maybe like incorporating free software into that alignment. And then I have two questions. The other was about, you said you work in a Google Classroom school, so are there any barriers that you've experienced in doing what you're doing within the Google Classroom school environment?
Okay, well, the first thing, DLCS, the Digital Literacy Computer Science, is a curriculum standard that Massachusetts teachers are supposed to subscribe to. They're all based on national standards, CSTA, for example, and most of the vendors will do that. I am not really mindful when I'm writing a lesson that it doesn't align with the standards, because the standards are broad enough to say the kids are going to learn how the internet works. Okay, that means everything. So if there's nothing in there saying you have to teach how DHCP works, for example, or what does a ping mean, or trace route, what does it do? But I'm covered. When I write my lessons, I don't really pay attention to what those standards are, because it's sort of another thing I have to deal with, and I don't deal with it. In terms of the Google Classroom stuff and Canvas, which are another one of these learning management systems, I use it for delivery of a quiz, or I use it for delivery of here's an article for you to read, but all the lessons that I try to do are going to be based on log in, use the command line, run this program, or do this for loop, and here's an example. So I could use other tools, but I use what I have. I mean, that's part of what you have to deal with. If there's always going to be another mechanism that may not be as of a burden, may not place you. I never did Canvas with my kids, because I think that thing is just really just Camel's a horse built by committee. It has a lot of different cool things in there, but you lose things. I like doing things on paper still. Kids learn geometry. You don't have to do everything on a freaking little computer screen. You should be using paper and pencil and rulers and protractors. It's actually a visual drawing and playing with things. I'm doing a collaborative effort now with my woman who teaches art. She does beautiful work with embroidery and stitching. And I'm doing a lesson on how these women who did the work for the actually Apollo guidance computer, did weaving, actual weaving of the chord memory. And I want to show them that, hey, this is a great thing. It's not I don't care what curriculum framework you look at. That's not something to do with. That's coming out of my own mind with my work. And this MIT actually had this called Women in Making, or Sisters in Making, where it has these histories of the women who actually wrote the programs into the wire. So I'm having the kids making little electromagnets using nails and a power supply. It's fun. It had nothing to do with a computer screen. It's just playing with their hands. Please.
I understand that, at least having recently been through Massachusetts public schools, there's a lot of students who have self-identified as not a computer person, especially outside of our bubble here. Have you made any headway in finding strategies of, even if you don't convince students that they are computer people, but rather that, at the very least, that they are, that, for example, using Linux or free software is not such a huge barrier as they have placed in front of themselves?
I'll give you a bigger answer. I have a Hall of Fame in my classroom. And featured on the Hall of Fame are people who don't look like me. Because you ask people, who's a famous computer scientist? They'll say Bill Gates or, Michael Dell, those kind of folks. I said, you ever heard of Lindsay Scott? If you've never heard of Lindsay Scott, Lindsay Scott is a supermodel. She was actually did Prada. She worked for Victoria's Secrets. And Lindsay Scott is an African-American woman, and she would go to these places to get a job, and she had this big stack of photographs. Oh, we need a picture of you in swimwear, we need a picture of you in daywear, or whatever, colors. And she was actually a software person, and she wrote a program for models have a digital portfolio. Now, any software engineer could probably figure out how to write a program or an app to do that. But a fashion model, or whatever job you have, you would know a lot more about what that program needs to do than anybody else. So you don't have to be a software engineer first. You are other things. There's something called EarSketch, which is a free program to let you learn how to do coding in Python or Java that's based on teaching music. So the idea of a mixer board. There's 101 of these examples. I had one student who wanted to, he did skateboarding. He said, I want to run an app from my phone that tells me where the closest skateboard park is, what kind of tricks and ramps it has, and whether or not the cops are going to chase you after a certain hour. So I said, hey, you know a lot more about this than I do. Here's what you want to do. But that's the way software is written, isn't it? It's written by not one person. No one person wrote Microsoft anything. It's written by a collaborative group of people, and people who have different skill sets have to do their part of it. Artists, journalists, you name it, musicians. If you have a computer game, you have music in there. You have people who have to do the set design, so to speak. If you look at who goes, maybe 2 actors on the stage, there's like 150 people behind the stage, costume designers, all those different skills, all those different talents. Dr. Joy Belwini, who is the poet of code. She wrote Unmasking AI. She did the Coded Bias documentary. I saw her speak at Museum of Science here just a few months ago, and I asked her, what would your message be for the kids? And she said, bring your own information to our world. We need everybody's input to make this stuff better. So again, thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate your attendance and appreciate the help of the staff here to get this all up and running. Thank you.
Thanks, Neil. Thanks.